We're basically going to just trigger each other. Because I have certain pet peeves. Does anybody have any idea what topics are going to be?
Is anybody surprised that John has opinions? Raise your hand if you're surprised that John has opinions.
It's not like
John has opinions.
Who has none. Is this thing on? Nope.
Nope. Yours is, mine's on.
Yeah, no mic.
You wanna talk into my nipple there?
I can talk into again.
Again?
Check. Oh, there we go. All right, and we're up. So, come on over. Come on, you guys can eat down here. We got tables. Come on down. Come on down.
Join us.
We got to put the hoods up, though, right? That's how this works.
That is how this works.
So this.
John discovered that I use a good smelling shampoo. He was like smelling the inside of the hood, and I was like, that's pure Bryson right there.
It smells like Rogaine. No, that's me. So just to introduce Bryson. Bryson, I have no idea when we first met. I think it was in DC. We basically met, I believe, at dinner that was like 2 blocks away from the Wardman Park, the Woodley station. And we had, I think it was Chinese food or something. And we were commiserating over starting businesses and what a horrible idea it was to start a business. But we basically kind of came up, you were doing Scythe, I was doing active countermeasures and BHI.
No, we met before Scythe.
We've been doing this for a really, really long time. And today, like I said, we're going to trigger each other. Is my horn straight?
Your horn's up,
crooked,
don't worry.
Right?
Nope, you're good.
They have drugs for that now.
They do, your horn's good.
So, all right. So I'm going to go first. Go ahead. Trigger me. Go for it.
Trigger you. So let's start with deception technology. A lot of people think deception technology is bullshit.
And those people are wrong. And I think that you're specifically talking about people like Moss, who runs DEF CON. And I think Brian Krebs has also said that as well. So I'm going to piss off them too, because these things are warm, by the way.
They are.
They're
Why do you think mine's unzipped?
Warm.
This is a veteran unicorn here. I know how toasty they get.
So yeah, I can see why a lot of people don't like the idea of deception technology, because if you look at deception technology, Bruce Schneier years ago came out and he said that security through obscurity is no security at all. And once again, there's another InfoSec luminary that I'm going to say is wrong. He's wrong. Security through obscurity works really, really, really well if you have the proper alerting and logging associated with it. So if an attacker breaks into your network and they trip on the tripwires, there should be something that alerts you that they tripped on those tripwires. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be honey accounts, it can be Kerberoastable accounts, it can be files in the environment. You don't have to stand up Windows 2000 boxes and basically set it up so they have to hack into a Windows 2000 box. It can be simple things. And this is going to tie into some of the stuff that he's talking about a little bit later. If you know what an attacker does post-exploitation, it becomes a lot easier to put the deception technology in the proper places where attackers usually get. But yes, so Krebs, Moss, and Schneier, suck it. All right, so
I want to add on that. So I used to be anti-deception technology as well, and you actually convinced me, but you didn't realize how you convinced me. So I used to do real offense, and I ran up against folks who actually tried to do like dedicated deception technology. Right? We've got the honeypots, we got the honeypots in the network, and we're being so clever. And when you're doing real APT work, it's not smash and grab. You got time to watch. And you just watch, and you can tell when something's fake, right? When it sits there and it only gets used occasionally, clearly it's fake, right? It sticks out. And the thing that actually convinced me about it is it was not that you're going to be able to confuse the A players. It was the fact that it's like putting up the alarm sticker on your house. You know where you have that and it's like, we're monitored by ADT.
Oh.
Most of the time you're not, right? Like you stopped paying the $99 a month a couple of years ago, but a criminal doesn't know the difference, right? When I see the sticker, now I have to think maybe this place is monitored. Maybe there is an alarm system that's here. And so the biggest advantage that I see to deception technology is if there's a whiff of deception technology in an environment, any attacker is going to have to extend their decision loop. You've now just added time into it because it's not that you're necessarily going to guarantee that I'm going to make a mistake, but I have to take longer so I don't possibly make a mistake thinking it might be in the environment. So you're buying yourself time where the attacker has to go slower, can't just go in and run out real fast, and that decision loop process is now longer. You've now put yourself inside the attacker's head.
Well, and that gets into, we've both done cyber offensive operations for hot nation state on nation state action.
So hot.
When the number one rule I had for the groups I worked with was don't get caught. Don't get burnt. And deception changes that.
Yep.
All right, so my turn. What exactly is the difference between adversary emulation and simulation? Because I see you talk about this all the time, and there's people that honestly are like looking in like the dictionary thinking there's synonyms and there's no differences. Are we just splitting hairs? Why does it matter?
So this is a funny thing when you become a product vendor, is you are suddenly subject to whatever the marketing definition of something is. When I went and created Scythe 6 years ago, Cobalt Strike was the only commercial red team product on the planet, and the entire way that we did pen testing and red teaming as a community was literally built off, for better or worse, what Cobalt Strike was. Well, for better or worse, there are disadvantages and constraints to that. And so the full story of how the idea of Scythe came up was not me looking to create an idea. Everybody know the company Target? You've shopped there? Target came to me in 2016 and asked me to build them a one-off implant because they couldn't test something. And I was like, hold on. There's no way you need to do custom research and development and do that. It sounds like you've done all the work to define a product idea for me. Clearly, the market needs a different way to do risk assessments. And so that was where the idea of Scythe came from. And so as I'm sitting there in my little couch coming up with this idea and building out over a couple of years, suddenly I kind of woke up because Forrester and Gartner came out with a quadrant. And once a quadrant exists, well, now it's fucking real. And that quadrant was called breach and attack simulation. And I was like, whoa, there are other people doing that. That's really cool. What are they doing? And I would look at the marketing, and the marketing was like, we're offense, we're APT in a box. You don't need a red team. We got you. We can automate red team.
Now he's trying to trigger me.
And I was like, huh, are they actually able to do that? And as I started to peel it back, I realized, no, not even close. What they had done is they had taken the evolution of GRC compliance and found a way to automate that with a little bit of a security checklist on top. But now there's this idea of attack simulation out there. And I'm like, all right, well, the description of the category seems to be what we're doing, but it's literally defined by the hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in how all these other vendors are actually doing it. By the way, half of them are Israeli, go figure. That's what you do. If you're an Israeli entrepreneur, you wake up and eat your Wheaties and figure out, how do I start a company in America?
Yeah.
You had something you would add?
I was going to say, beautiful GUIs, though.
Oh,
the Israelis do
best
UI,
GUIs.
the best GUIs.
Cornflower blue as far as the eye can see.
Yep. Hey, wait a minute. Never mind.
And so I'm sitting here stuck with attack simulation now has a meaning that's not attack simulation. So what can I do? And I was like, well, I, at the time, started going on the circuit with educating folks on a different approach to red teaming. So if you were at DerbyCon or if you've been at some of the security conferences like 5-6 years ago, this was all new stuff, right? Purple teaming, all of that. Nobody was really doing any of this. And so I'm out there like, hey, there's a different way. And I called it adversarial emulation because at the end of the day, security is defined by the threat, not your fucking checklist. So what's the real difference between emulation and simulation, and why do you care? Because it's really a nerd argument, and the market does not care at all. No customer cares about this at all. But why we care as practitioners, right? It's why we get in the debate of what is actually penetration testing? What is a red team? What is a vulnerability assessment? We have the same kind of thing where marketers have co-opted our language in our practitioner field and abused it to sell. So the difference is simulation is where I am approximating something, right? So a great example is ransomware. Ransomware has clearly been a scourge that has actually finally broken the public consciousness the same way that Target did 10 years ago and gotten the attention of we need to invest in this. How do I safely demonstrate an assessment of something that is inherently destructive? Because I can't actually destroy the production environment. That will get me fired. So here's where I have to do a simulation. So an example of a simulation is I get on the box, I create an invisible folder with some dummy files, and then I encrypt that. I now have done all of the host activities of the equivalent of ransomware, without actually doing the destruction. So I've simulated that component. The emulation will be the command and control where that implant is calling out to its jump node to going back to the operator to do those things, right? If I did data exfiltration of actual data, I've now emulated, and you can see what was the DLP against that.
So the way I like to take that down is right at that last point. Simulation is running scripts and ad hoc bespoke parts of the attack path. Emulation is end to end. It's what is actually being taken from the environment, what is actually being encrypted in the environment, all the way up to the command and control side. So I'm big in music. So you used to have all these devices that you would have like synthesizers and drum machines, and they were physical devices. And now they're all emulated in products like Reason, but they're actually emulated down to the circuit level to replicate what that particular device does. And it has to be, you can't just simulate it, you emulate it from beginning, signal input, to output of what happens. And that's the fundamental difference, because you can simulate all the time and you're going to be wrong. Once you start creating an emulator, think of a video game like Nintendo emulators. They are literally emulating the circuitry of a Nintendo, so the software that runs on that emulator executes the way it would in the real thing. So that's how I try to.
So let's pick up on that. Why does it matter going end to end, right? So for example, there's a really good product here today. It's free, it's open source. Red Canary, I don't know if Adam Mashinshi's in here, he's the director for it, and it's called Atomic Red Team. And it does atomic tests. Now that has value, but there's a gap to what that value is. So what would you say that gap is?
A lot of the gap is that each of the atomic tests exist in and of themselves. So whenever you run the atomic test, it can do like, script object, downloading SCT files, executing downloading the SCT files. You can also see where it does compression of files and maybe tries to zip those things off. But they're discrete tests that run pretty much independent of each other. A lot of value in that. I think it's awesome. That's great. But it doesn't say from the entire chain, from the beginning all the way through the end, what points, like what's our depth of coverage, what point do we actually break? God damn it, I'm going to say cyber kill chain. Looking at the entire attack path methodology end to end, it doesn't do that very well.
So I was going to pivot that into MITRE ATT&CK. Who's heard of MITRE ATT&CK?
Oh, Jesus.
Right? I mean, we pretty much have to pay royalties if we don't say MITRE ATT&CK about MITRE ATT&CK on how to attack. Here's the fault of MITRE ATT&CK and how it feeds right into that, right? MITRE ATT&CK is great. We now have a common vernacular to be able to describe techniques, tactics, and procedures between each other. No longer can we debate, well, is it this or it's that? No, that means this, and that's where it fits, right? That's awesome. But here's where it's bad, right? It's so easy to look at each one of those boxes and be like, oh, all right, well, I've got these atomic tests. I've completed that box. We've now solved initial execution. We're done. Here's the gap. Look at MITRE ATT&CK as a periodic table. Each one of those is an element. And just like in real life, those elements, the quality of those elements, the order of those elements gives you a very particular chemical equation, which is what an attack is, right? So I can test things atomically, like this is what hydrogen does, this is what oxygen does. Turns out when I have 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, that's a completely different thing. And how that works in the real world is attacks are state-based, right? Where I am, the privileges I have, change what I can do. If I've stolen credentials, my ability to do lateral movement is going to be eminently different than if I don't. So I can do an atomic test, but if I can't chain them together where this leads to this, leads to this, which by the way is what an attacker does in the real world, then I'm not getting the true benefit of understanding that context. And here's the real ROI, to put the business term on it, that you care about. Exploits are forever. Vulnerabilities will always exist. Access will inevitably happen. It will happen. Here's the cool thing. If you look at an attack compared to a new attack, compared to tomorrow's attack, 90 to 95% of the attack chain's TTPs are the same. Think about that. They're the same. They are only doing certain novel innovations in the tradecraft to tweak here, here, and here. And if you focus on that attack chain looking for those, you will not absolutely stop every attack, right? You're not stopping the 0-day APT, but you will start catching the attack chain quicker and more reliably over time if you're doing that.
Well, and that gets into one of the things that we didn't jump into it, but like threat intelligence. I absolutely hate the idea where people put out and they say, this is the attack path, like I'm just going to say it. You got groups like Mandiant, right? They release a report on APT, random number here, and they say these are the techniques that they use. And I think that there's value in understanding that. But what I hate is how vendors say, we detect and we work within that specific attack path. And a lot of executives then say, oh, great. Well, we're protected against the 15 things that this APT group does. We're defended against that APT group, and that's bullshit. Whenever you see those reports that they come out and they say this is what APT 28, 27, Sad Panda, Shadow Panda, Lazarus Group, Lapsus, whoever, that's what they detected in that attack. Attackers will always use the techniques and the vulnerabilities that are available to them at the time of the attack on the specific environment that they're attacking. Attackers are like water. If you have a leaky roof, you can have a leak at the top of your house and it goes all the way down. It's not going to follow the same path every single time. And this gets into probably my biggest rant, and I have no idea, and I'm going to turn this into a question, you think about it, and then at the end you answer it. Why in the hell hasn't Nessus, why hasn't Qualys, why hasn't Rapid7, for their vulnerability management products that they have, either incorporated simulation or emulation post-exploitation as part of their vulnerability management profiles? Why? How come I can't run a scanner and it emulates an attacker and it pivots around my environment? It says, well, you're missing these patches, and oh, by the way, you have 3 Kerberoastable accounts. Why is that not part of our vulnerability management discussions that we are having today? Because that's going to give you a much fuller understanding of vulnerability management. If you look at MITRE and you look at the entire matrix, do you have any idea how many of those vulnerabilities are actually detected by an external vulnerability scanner? It's like 2 or 3. It's like exploitable remote service, and then the other one is exploit a misconfiguration.
Initial access.
That's it, too. So you're spending thousands of dollars chasing your tail, trying to patch everything, which you should do, by the way. You should absolutely do it. But yet we're ignoring 98% or more of what an attacker actually does in our environment for checking our real vulnerability surface in our environment. And that drives me insane, because when we do pen tests and we find vulnerabilities, there's a lot of times people are like, well, what exactly is the CVSS scores? Has anybody actually assessed the technique that you've done to give us a criticality? Because I noticed in your report you said it's critical, but I don't see that actually tied to anything on the open internet. It's like, who cares? It's how we got domain administrator. It's how we got access to your sensitive data, and that chain from initial access to how we got it needs to be taken in context. And more importantly, because of the taxonomy, because of the periodic table, for the first time, folks, we have the ability to test, let's say, 75% of the post-exploitation techniques that the attackers would use today. It's not 100. But you know what? For me as an attacker, you have shut down 75% of the doors that are open to me. And more importantly, I don't even know what doors you've closed until I've gone up and I've tried to rattle the door handle. So let's start shutting down those doors and looking at vulnerability management in a fundamentally different way. Let's not look at the Mandiant report or the Verizon report of what this attack group did and saying, well, we got to protect against these 15 things. That's what we need to protect against. Let's get to the point where we can start testing and evaluating all of those post-exploitation techniques on a regular and continuous basis. Because I don't know if you know this, but he has another company, a great company called Grim. They do pen testing, and like, their pen testers, just so you know, they're good. Trust me, they're really, really good. We have pen testing companies. You know what? We want our jobs to be harder. Because I know his team really well. Those guys love a challenge. I know my team really well. We hate it when we get on site and we're like, oh, God damn it, another group policy preference file? Again? No, we like the novel stuff. We like the new stuff. We like exploring, identifying new vulnerabilities. We don't want to keep reporting on the same garbage. And we can easily take care of a lot of those vulnerabilities today.
Because where you're pushing the commercial pen tester to be novel, you've pushed the attacker to have to spend money. So you threw two questions at me. I'm going to go back to
Yeah,
threat
go back to the
intelligence,
first
right?
one.
So how much money do we spend on threat intelligence? As an industry, we spend $10 billion a year. Are you getting $10 billion worth of defense? It's in the name, right? It's supposed to be intelligence. It's supposed to get me in the loop where I can make decisions around it. And intelligence basically comes in two forms. Most of that money is giving you stale IOCs. This is a bad IP. This is a bad domain. This is a bad hash file. What have you done? At best, you've told me yesterday to get to tomorrow. So I spend a whole bunch of time solving yesterday. The attacker is already in that loop. How hard is it to change a file to give a different hash value? Anybody know? If I add a 0 to a file, did I just change the hash value? Who here can add a 0 to any file? Congratulations, you've now just made a defensive bypass. You have just defeated $10 billion worth of engineering. You think I'm kidding? That is all of it. And here's the best part. Yesterday's a metaphor. How old and stale is that data actually?
Sometimes it's years.
Right? The second part of threat intelligence, right, is the fancy mandate report. They are phenomenal, well-researched 40 to 60-page opuses of brilliance. And I'm not being facetious.
They are good. They are good.
I am not being facetious. They are fantastic. But what does it take for you to take that report and bring it into your environment? Anyone figured that one out? I would love to know if you have figured that out, because that's $1 million idea right there.
I am going to say one group that's different is CISA. When CISA releases their alerts, you go down to the bottom, they list out the actual techniques that were used. So that leads me to another question. Talking about a value of a $10 billion industry. I want you all to think in your head how much you spend on threat intel feeds that are specific, like IOCs, like the IP address, the hash values, and URLs, domain names, whatever. For all of those threat techniques, how many of them are completely unique and not documented already in MITRE? Let me repeat that. Let's say you spend $100,000 and they give you 100,000 techniques that attackers are using. What percentage of those techniques are already mapped to a documented technique that you can get for free in MITRE?
99% would be my guess.
Let's go look at it. Go ahead. Sorry. You had the second one,
so
too.
First, here's the question. So we are spending that much money. Why? Because it's convenient. Those stale IOCs, machine readable right into your EDR, right into a firewall
Which
rule.
I also want to point out, though, a lot of the companies, they write signatures for their AV, for their EDR. They write signatures for their firewalls. They write signatures for their web proxies. And then they take it and then they repackage the damn things. And then they sell it back to you as an IOC feed. Because your antivirus is already doing threat intel feeds. Your firewall is already doing threat intel feeds. They literally just found a creative way to upsell you to buy the same thing that you've already purchased.
So moving on to vulnerability management. One, vulnerabilities are inevitable. I have yet to ever find a piece of code that didn't have a bug. Doesn't exist. Never will exist. And here's the kicker. Doesn't even matter. What percent of access is actually coming from exploitation of a vulnerability?
Oh.
Right? Isn't that what quishing is doing? I just wanted to use that. Yeah, I deserve that. But I was using sarcastically.
Oh, she's got you.
So phishing, which all of the stupid names, they all fall under phishing, all right? We can all agree that here, right? We will never use some stupid smishing, quishing, whatever the fuck, right? Smishing? It's all phishing, okay? Phishing, right? It is a user using a computer the way the computer was designed to be used, right? Turns out that's the best way in. It's the best way in, right? They'll just open the door for you. That's actually one of the funniest things I've ever seen to getting access is like you're having trouble getting something to run and you call the end user and you're like, hey, I'm not getting the call back. Of course, you don't phrase it that way. You're like, they're like, I'm trying to get this thing to run that I sent you. Like, and they're like arguing with the IT team to whitelist you. Have you ever seen that? Sorry, allow list. Have you ever done that? And they're like arguing with the team, like, no, let me in, like, let them do it. Like, the user is your best friend as an attacker. They want to help you. They're there to do that. But so here's the thing about vulnerabilities. You're spending all this money on people, process, and technology to build the proverbial defense in depth, right? No system lives in isolation. There are systems that are internet facing, and you should probably have a little bit more of a critical eye to those. But most of the systems in your stack are not internet facing. They have a different risk profile and surface area. So what does CVSS do today? Some nerd somewhere in isolation tell me a number. And how many of you have a policy at your place that once it's a certain number, you are required to address the vulnerability? Yep. How much of that do you actually think is helping you? Do you have any idea? No idea, right? Because you're not getting any context for it. Every day, the great machine spits out a list of 10,000 things that you need to go fix.
Oh.
By itself, right? There's no context for it. You need the system of systems perspective. Hey, isn't that what a red team does? Problem is, can we afford a red team to go and look at 10,000 things on a daily basis? We can't.
I hope you can, and if you can, I'll take your business card.
Yeah, if you have that budget, please, either of us.
You're going to need us both.
Work with you.
We're happy. We charge half as much in certain situations because we care twice as much, folks. So
there's two aspects to this, right? There's the inside aspect of, can I get a system of systems view? Where is my investment in defense stacking up against that list? And then there's the external part, which is what is that exploitability, right? I would argue that's a pseudoscience because there are places that are like, we know how much that's being exploited in the wild. Well, how are you doing that? We're on the dark web. Have you heard of it? You laugh, but procurement will roll over with 6 digits when you say dark web.
You rub their belly, they like it.
Yeah, they're just like, dark web, right by the ears. That's 200 grand.
I always wonder what people think the dark web is. It's like the cantina on Tatooine where all the hackers get together, and it's like, Bryson, so today I was thinking about hacking General Electric. I think we're going to be hacking General Electric tomorrow at 2 p.m. And like these, threat cell vendors are like, they're like, got him, GE. They're going to attack tomorrow at 2. Are you Paul Revere? Good God. So.
Oh no, they're disclosing all the vulnerabilities that I'm about to go into.
All those exploits, they share
all the exploits. We just share them freely.
Dark web is legacy IRC. No, it's because it's text-based still.
All right, so one of the things that I also wanted to ask you about, like this vulnerability management, is the place that EDR has come into. Like, how many of you do offensive operations? Yeah, let's be honest, EDRs are getting good. They're getting really good. And there was a handful of people that sounded the alarm on this a long time ago, and they're like, EDRs are going to continue to get better. So my question to you is, if I have a good EDR, and I'm going to let Bryson answer, but a question to everybody. If I have a good EDR and it stops execution, I don't need to test that other stuff, right? So like if I run Atomic Red Team and it kills the PowerShell from executing, then I am immune to everything from, Atomic Red Team or PowerShell Empire or Scythe. I download it, it didn't run. We're good, we stopped them right there. Is that a good way to be looking at things? Because I know you and I have talked about it a lot, where we have customers like, we caught your implant, therefore we're completely secure from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to an industry psychology that I saw even before EDRs got that good, where you've got the arrogant customer who hires your red team and they're like, you're not going to get in. It's like, what does that prove,
okay,
right? You paid me for 1 week's worth of work.
So you hired me because I suck?
You kind of rolled the dice on how much I'm going to be able to do in a week with that scope or 2 weeks with that scope, right? You want to give me 6 months and pay me to work like a real APT? then let's talk, right? So it's a scope, it's a luck. There's like all these factors into what that might have told you, right?
And the other thing is, like, real attackers try and fail, try and fail. They fish, they fail. They fish, they fail. They fish, they succeed. They get execution. They get caught. They modify. They're constantly changing their tactics. And like you said, they have a lot more time than we have. Like a red team where you get like 3 fishes at an environment that are all approved. And it's like, what we want is a UPS, a FedEx one, and then I don't know, maybe free shoe vouchers. Those are the only ones we're going to allow in. The attackers aren't dealing with those constraints ever.
Yep. And so most of the time, what you're getting with a red team is a snapshot in time. A successful red team was a snapshot that is inherently limited in scope. It's limited in resource, time, and the scope of what you can test. Right? You've all heard the joke, right? Well, that's out of scope, and right, nothing is out of scope to an attacker, so you've already made that limitation. But here's the other thing. Does any red team have the resources to go against N computers in an environment? No, we don't. We typically go kind of from 1 to 5, and that's the best we sort of focus on. So how much did I get out of that? Taking, in fact, again, it's just a snapshot in time to a business and an organization where everything is constantly changing. Quick anecdote on red teaming that I think is really funny. Do you know the most common reason that red team fish don't work? They're over-engineered. They're too good. And it sticks out. They're like, somebody really put effort into this. This is not an actual fish.
Okay, look, so years ago, I did a fish, and I'm horrible at spelling. I've made this clear that seriously.
Those work.
Google literally sometimes thinks, oh, you're writing in French. I'm going to change your language. I'm that bad. I'm that bad. I am. And like my fish has worked really, really well.
You're a liberal arts major?
I know I am, but oh God, that's a long
He's
story.
actually a liberal arts major.
Poli-sci, baby, yeah. Thanks. There's one here. We'll make each other coffee later because that's what our skills were. Oh. Actually, I feel pretty good about asking that question since I bought fries and burgers for everyone here. But it actually worked really well. And the other thing that is interesting talking about this, whenever I write an email for a webcast, it has a higher successful deployment rating than if I have somebody else who is actually good at English writing our emails, talking about our webcast that's coming up next week. Just because mine read really horrible. It goes through the filters very
Well, with you, it comes across as authentic. But when you're looking at the real world with phishing, right? Everyone here has seen the proverbial Nigerian scam email, right? Why are they so bad? What's that? Nope. They speak the Queen's English perfectly. I would actually argue every one of those people who writes fish speaks better English than any one of us in this room. Because they actually know the rules of grammar. And like, anyone here know what a conjunction is? Like, fuck, I don't know. Like prepositions. I'm already lost, right? Pluperfect.
Yeah.
Right? They do it on purpose. They intentionally craft that horrible email. He does it on accident because he can't help himself. They're doing it on purpose. Why? Anyone know why? What?
Selecting your target.
Selecting your target. Your target self-selects, right? The kind of person that thinks, I'm going to next give you my social security number because you're the dearest beloved Nigerian prince trying to get 20 billion gold pounds of bullion out of Iraq is a fucking idiot. So if they read that email and still believe that, they have told me, I am your target. The rest of us, if we're doing it, we're trolls. We're going to waste their time. They don't want to waste the time. They want the money. So they write an email that is so bad, it self-selects. Red teams have this problem because they're over-engineering it. The best fish in the real world that work are the garbage, click here for $250 Amazon gift card. Every employee falls for that. Maybe this is a failure of capitalist society. We're not paying our people enough. I don't know, but it works.
We had one, this is horrible. We had one where this company did a charity run with a shoe company, and we sent a fish in pretending to be the shoe company. And we said, hey, we're going to give you all 50% off shoes, click here. And it worked great.
Yep.
Because they just did it a month ago, and it was timely, and it was great. The shoe company calls us up, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" Our customer support department is very angry at us. Please stop. So we stopped, and then we did the debriefing, and I'm on GoToWebinar, and I'm debriefing to the entire company what we did. We researched that you guys all did a run. It was a charity, and we basically said that, you know, we would use that because it was timely and it worked. So we created this fake attack, explained the entire thing in intense detail, and I said, does anybody have any questions? And the questions were all, well, when are we going to get our shoes? My 50% off discount coupon code did not work. When will you make this work for me? And I'm just like, okay, let's do this again. It was a fish. I'm trying to attack. Yeah. But I have these shoes that I want. It was, we've opted not to use that ruse again, just because the customer support issues were that bad.
So this leads to, I have a bit of a controversial opinion. I think phishing training is a waste of time. Is a fucking waste of time. Why do we keep doing it?
It's okay. It's not golf.
I agree, or no, boo, get off the stage. Either way, like, that's feedback. I'm open to feedback. We can argue about it. And the story that really encapsulates this for me, because our industry, these executives, right, are trying to act like grown-ups to the like actual grown-ups, you know, the business, the whole reason the organization exists. And that organization has everything down to, right, well, profit and loss, and this is how much days sales outstanding. They have all these metrics with numbers. Where are our metrics with numbers in our space? They're all made up. And so we like phishing training because it gives us statistics that make us feel like we're solving the problem. And I'll never forget this. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm talking to the CISO, and he was so excited to share this like success story with me. And he's like, you know what? We started this. First line, we got a baseline, right? Because with metrics, it's all about a baseline. I need a number to compare, and that's the success. And my initial number was 32% clicked on that initial campaign. We did phishing training. We spent money. We did webinars. And afterward, we got down to 27%. And I was like, what'd you accomplish? And he kind of looks at me and he's like, didn't you get it? Like 5%. Like, I was like, it only takes one fish. One fish. That's all I ever need. If it's ever above 0, game over, man. He's like, oh. And he was so defeated, right? Because he found a statistic. Phishing training gave him a number he could hold to and go to the business and be like, I am investing money and I am solving a problem. Except he's not solving the problem. The reason phishing works, besides users using the computers the way it was designed, how much does it cost for me to send 1 fish versus me to send 10 million fish? It is a negligible cost difference, right?
And that's why.
What's the best your threat intelligence is going to do? Let's block that domain. And let's block that domain. And I can keep doing that over and over again, and I will get in. Business email compromise. I'm phishing you from somebody you already know and trust.
Or you look like somebody I know and trust.
Well,
right?
but yeah, I'm in their account. It's Barbara who sends you at 9 a.m. the Excel document of the inventory with a macro every Monday morning at 9. I'm going to be Barbara at 9.
Or they ask for the Excel spreadsheet with the macros.
Yeah.
You send that back to me.
Yep.
Yes, here you go. So, you know, I still think that we should do phishing assessments. I do. And I think that part of it should be not targeting the users per se, but making sure that the technical controls are working.
Yep.
For example, what type of attachments do you allow through? Right? Everyone's like, oh, okay, well, we allow Word docs and Excel spreadsheets, and yeah, we block executables and zip files and RAR files. Okay, yeah, we block those things. That's good. So I got a question. How many, don't answer this, but how many of your organizations allow .rdp files through?
How do you know?
If you've been on our webcast, many of you have already shut that down, but we came up with a technique that .rdp files are allowed through almost any email provider, and we're back to a one-click compromise. All it takes is someone to click a .rdp file and we get access onto their computer system and it's instant. That's the type of testing that we should be doing, is seeing what is allowed through, what are the different techniques that are allowed through, at least getting a better understanding so when an attack happens, we have a better understanding of what our vulnerabilities are and our risk profile for that is.
Validate the technical controls around the users. And here's the thing, there are different user groups in the business. So one of the easiest things that I point out is my favorite phishing target is recruiting. Recruiting's entire job is to interact with strangers they don't know, opening attachments.
Nothing but junkies and needles, man. Nothing but junkies and needles.
How can you solve that? Well, maybe we don't have recruiting work directly with everybody through email. Maybe we have all of those things go through a portal, and now I've changed the risk profile around a high access user group. And then I can validate that, right? So stop punishing the users, understand the users, and go to meet them on their terms and bring the technical firepower to where they are and how they work, make their lives easier to make your lives easier.
So I got you. Okay, so here's a. Oh, this gentleman has a question.
What about measuring the report rates that people get when you send them phishes, though? Like, what percentage of people report it as a phishing email?
Yes, that's good, right? So this has been one of the changes that has happened in certain parts of the industry. The question was, what about the reports on employees reporting a campaign, right? So we've now changed our users into being intelligence sensors. That's a good thing, right? We want our users to work with us. We want them to be champions contributing to the solution as opposed to just being part of the problem. That 100% yes. So in that case, I'm not training you on phishing. I'm training you on how to report the process, right? And now you're working with me. That's what I'm training you on.
So I've got a question for you. You know, we're talking about risk profiles and phishing and things like that. How many of your organizations actually restrict access to the internet? Not talking deny listing, but allow listing. Going into your filters and looking for uncategorized and blocking it. Basically saying if it's never seen this domain, it's never seen this website, don't let your users go there. How many of you are doing that now? Awesome. All right, that's a good number. How many of you are terrified to do that in your environment because your users will revolt because they can't get to the internet? So stick with me on this. Let's say you blocked access to the internet. Your users revolt. Don't they all have a magic internet device for personal surfing in their pocket? We can change the way that we look at the threat landscape. And something as simple as like locking off a huge portion of the internet and saying, you know what, if Cisco Umbrella has never seen this website, you probably don't want your users going there. That's okay. And there may be complaints. Well, I can't get to the social website. I can't get to my kids' college grades or whatever. That's why we have these things in our pockets. And I think it's like what you're talking about, changing the metric and changing the thought process and saying, you are going to be measured by how many campaigns you detect and you turn in is a fundamental change in the way that we think and the way our users think. Changing the way that you look at how we do casual web surfing is this is the magic device that we do casual web surfing. And this is a cultural change, by the way. Because many people like to surf the internet from their computer because it looks a lot like work. Right? Like I'm sitting here doing this, it's just Alt-Tab, and all of a sudden I got a spreadsheet up, right? You can make it look that way. Maybe not being so hard if you come into somebody's cube and they're on their phone and thinking, well, Bill's not working. Changing the way that we look at it. I saw Jason Blanchard go through. One of the customers that he did backdoors and breaches years ago, they changed the way that they referenced passwords, where if anybody called up and they said, hey, I need to change my password, they would immediately say, great, I'm happy to help you change your passphrase today. Changing like little imperceptible changes in the way that we measure, in the way that we restrict, but still allow people to do things. Changing the way that they look at passwords versus passphrases can have a monstrous change in the overall security of an organization.
Who works in an operational technology or industrial control system environment? Do any of you? You do? Okay. So that's harder to do sometimes, right? Right? You're almost like going over like across like that boundary. It's like being in a different country. You know what I mean? And you sort of like, you show up with the donuts, be like, can we take that, right? They know, and they know they intimidate you too, right? Because they are usually large physical people who are like, I will fuck you up with the lead pipe. You think I'm kidding? Am I kidding? Nope. I'm not kidding. And those folks, the computers are like the fun thing that's around, right? Most of them, their world is physical maintenance, right? I turn wrenches. There just happens to be a computer there now. This is new, right? You want to understand operational technology? Look at where we were in IT 20 years ago. That's where they are today. But that point about going to your phone, most of the time they're not allowed to have phones because it's not going to fit with their protective equipment. So that's not an option. And these folks are the worst violators. I will share a story anonymously of an example, right? So when you're working the night shift there, you're pretty much sitting there with all your little dials and you got nothing to do. Just watch the dials, right? It's like Homer Simpson, right? He's just sitting there and he's like, don't go to the red. And if it goes to the red, do something, right? It's a lot of time. So what do you do when you are most often of the male species and you got nothing but time on your hands with internet access? What is on most of the internet? What do you think it is? It's not a trick question.
Shit posting on Twitter.
Porn!
Oh.
Now, is there a relationship between porn and malware?
No.
Wishful thinking don't make it so. Heavily laced with malware. And this place actually
What porn are you serving? He's got a very...
the good stuff.
I have this vision of like, oh, that's a ROP. Oh, we got a no-op sled. Yes, all the way down. All the way down. All the way down. Oh.
I'm the only person who can ever make him blush. So here's how they tried to solve this. There was a governmental component to this, and the government actually created a curated, safe porn library for them. You think this is funny? I know of a U.S. asset owner not too many states away from here that just last week had this same problem. And HR got involved, and it was an HR issue because IT security couldn't stop them. Again, going in there, they're like, I've got the Vaseline in this hand, I got the pipe in this hand, you're not taking this away from me. And so the only way they could solve it was through an HR response. These are your user bases, right? That's the business. You are subject. You can't just take the internet away, right? You can't just say we're going to go to an allow list only, right? We do recognize that, yes, that certainly is going to be reducing your surface area, but it is very much understanding the particular culture where you are.
I want to point out, that's a very small edge case. Like, I'm willing to bet for almost everyone
Is that
here.
what you're going on that?
Everyone
Is
here.
everything a pun now?
Phrasing, are we still doing that? Is that still
Phrasing?
I think, like,
Get it out.
if we're dealing with like, a 0.1% that we're actually providing porn to our employees, let's not create policies around that, okay?
I'm not offering that up as a mainstream
Okay,
case
I'm
study.
just saying.
It is an example of that is the real world that's out there, right? And like, so I really resent, and I think most of us do, when you see the experts get up on stage and they're like, you need to be doing zero trust. It's so easy. You know what you do? You just segment everything. How much of a pain in the ass is that for me to maintain that segmentation? Do I have to buy additional licenses? Do I now have to apply patches now that I can't do remotely? Now I have to physically go over there and do that, right? Also, when I'm segmenting, I'm changing how somebody's actually doing their job, right?
I also blame auditors for that. And here, sorry, dude.
Who's
a
an
lot
auditor?
of auditors.
You're an auditor?
Lot of auditors.
You're an auditor? Thank you for your service.
A lot of auditors, like whenever we talk about segmentation, like we go in and we're like, yeah, you guys should segment. And they're like, well, how do we do that? We can set up jump host or authorized host to push patches. You can put in the different filters. You just want to make sure that your user population can't get to OT. They can't get to the credit card data. They can't get to here. And then an auditor comes in and they're like, no. Nothing can be allowed between these two networks. This network needs to be completely isolated from the entire internet. And you're like, okay, cool. How do I patch it? And they're like, well, you manually have the patches. Well, I have 400 different types of software. You expect me to put it on a USB? Sorry, I keep looking over at you, and I apologize. You're my straw auditor, and I apologize for that. And it sucks because I think that, you know, a lot of the people that do auditing and security testing, once again, they're like people sitting at, like thought leaders sitting at the front of a room. They basically come up with these dictates and they say, this is what you're going to do. And anything you do to try to explain what you're doing is automatically shut down. And they automatically are like, well, that's not something I understand, so we're going to basically say that this is an audit finding. We have to have people in the industry that are a little bit more intelligent, can kind of understand, once again, going back to the point, the attack path, right? What is the actual attack path that somebody could go through? What are all the different gates? What are the different ways that we have it assessed? Because honestly, at the end of the day, our military and intelligence community is running on Spark 9 systems. Trust me, I know where they're at. I've seen the systems, they're still there. Our entire financial system from many banks is still running on AS400 computer systems. So if we want to sit here and we want to say, no, everything must be patched, no, everything must be up to date, no, everything must be segmented, that's not the way the world actually works. And I think it requires us to come up with some creative solutions that aren't so necessarily binary of, yes, it's completely segmented, or no, it's not segmented.
Well, that goes right back into the system of systems perspective around a vulnerability, right? We are not in the practice of stopping risk, right? We mitigate risk. Right? We use an intelligent approach to saying, we understand this problem, here's what we think about that. And then the business accepts the residual risk as much as we understand it. That's what we do. There is no, I have stopped risk. That's the whole reason that segmentation exists, is because we have this theory that an air gap stops risk. Has anybody ever seen a real air gap? You have seen an actual air gap. Tell me how it was actually air gapped and nothing ever touched it, ever.
It's still never touched, and we have to physically update.
So it is, you do the sneaker net,
Cool.
right?
Yours, what do you got?
Sneakiness.
Yeah.
Cool. So when I was working at Department of Defense, I was working at the NRO. I can actually say that organization now, which is neat. And we had a whole bunch of networks, SAPSAR programs, special access programs, that were supposed to be isolated from the classified networks. And we went through and we did a test to see what was the connectivity between the different networks. So if you went from like SIPR and NIPR and all these different classified networks, they were all supposed to be completely air-gapped, completely isolated. And we found something like 85 different connections going to lower classification networks. And we found 10 that were directly connected to the open internet. And I remember flying out to DC and kind of walking through all of this, and no one knew how they actually got there. You know, it was always something that was ad hoc. It was put in for a specific case. A general wanted it, a congressperson wanted to have an internet terminal, and they would send out these little boxes that would connect up to their home network. And you can never really look at that stuff and you can say it's completely, unless it's a small, like, you know, small little device. My favorite, like, air gap networks are some of the microwave relays that some of the power companies have. Anybody here work for a power company? Where they do point-to-point microwave dishes. And like the only way in is you got to somehow intercept the microwave communications, which, by the way, don't do that. That's a bad idea. We actually saw point-to-point.
You won't have children.
Maybe you do want to do that. My favorite point-to-point microwave story is the connection between Chicago and New York for financial services, which is a completely different thing. But the point is, there's always these creative ways. It's like Jurassic Park. Life will find a way. The internet will find a way to permeate into an environment every single time. So we have like a few minutes left.
Yeah,
you want to
maybe
close
open
it
it
out?
up.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap it up.
Well, anybody have any questions for us?
Yeah, questions are good.
We like questions. We're friendly.
What's that government sanctioned porn site?
What do you say?
What's the government sanctioned porn site?
What's the government sanctioned porn site? No, it wasn't a government sanctioned
I got
porn
it.
site.
You got a pen and paper?
Whitehouse.com.
It's the government sanctioned
No,
porn
.com was the
site
actual
is called
porn site.
Wikipedia. I have worked a number of cases where people could only get to the Wikipedia and they were surfing porn on the Wikipedia. And I just want you to know, if you're surfing porn on the Wikipedia, it's like drinking Sterno. You've hit rock bottom. Right, another question. Yeah.
Aren't stale IOCs useful for seeing what hit you like a week ago?
Can be.
Now that Intel comes in, it's like, oh yeah, we saw this hash last week.
It can be, but once
Yeah,
again,
that's
I go
the
back
threat
to
hunting perspective,
you've
right?
already got that in your AV, you've already got that in your firewall, you've already got that in your web proxy, you've already got that in a bunch of different devices. If they are that far behind, you're in trouble. So don't pay twice for something you're already paying for. Yep. Another question. Yeah.
So if I'm looking to engage a pen test company first of all, how much more? Should I ask the question in your executive summary, which is what the executives go by, you're not going to read the report. In both, should there be a disclaimer, like you were saying before, this is important time?
It's in every one of our reports.
Yeah, so first of all is some of the reasons that folks hire independent companies is they need the letter of attestation. And I will tell you, as a vendor, I am very particular about the scope of what I'm allowed to do before I'm willing to provide my name on saying I've actually done to something to a certain level that I feel confident to.
I think it's the second sentence in yours.
Is
I think yours reads, Grimm was hired to do an assessment. This is a point in time statement. I think it's the second sentence
that
on
probably
yours.
is.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I think that you should look for is, again, show me past reports where you've anonymized, make sure that they know how to anonymize, because I've seen folks share reports that I've got data I should not have. So if they can't do that, then you shouldn't trust them with your data.
Move.
It's one of those things, like, it's so obvious, you think you shouldn't have to ask the question, but yet it still happens. Where they've shown context to whatever they're doing, right? I don't need you to be clever. I need you to figure out, can you show how you understood my business and everything you found was in the context of my business? And then how good are you at actually giving me remedial guidance? Are you, here's a large report, throw it and you disappear? Or are you actually good at making it so even though you do go away because I don't want to pay for that, I know I've got enough data to faithfully be able to recreate what you did, because that's how I'm going to prove I've solved it.
I'm also going to throw this out there. The good firms, they're out in the community. The good firms are giving presentations. The good firms are running cons. The good firms are sharing tools and techniques. They're out there trying to make the community better. And if you look at a firm that's constantly trying to make the community at large better, they're going to make your company better as well. All right, yeah.
Vulnerability accountability. Vulnerability remediation accountability. I find it's like a hot potato. Nobody wants to do this. It's not my system. Oh, well, we do it, we support it, but we don't maintain it. Or, oh, it's not calling the function.
So that's configuration management, right? I need to know who the system owner is.
I want to repeat the question real quick. The question was accountability for vulnerability remediation. How do you get people to do that? Go.
Yeah, so configuration management is 80% of information security. If IT doesn't know who's in charge of a system, what's the state of that system, what are we going to do in security, right? We're going to be running around trying to gather data to try to figure out who am I pinning the tail on after I already have work. They need to be responsible for that asset prior, or else we're wasting our time.
It's a management problem. It's politics. And basically, you need to have somebody in the company that is high enough up to drive it through. And basically, what that's telling me is security stops about mid-management. There's no one at like the CTO, CSO level that actually has authority and the power to drive it through across the organization.
It's the CISO role is so freshly baked into the organization that they don't really understand what to do with our recommendations. And they have system owners, so they know whose responsibility is. But these are the higher level management. They don't have the.
But you don't have the stick.
Yeah, but you don't have the stick.
Yeah,
most
so no
CISO
stick.
roles. Your number one job as a CISO, and this is absolute honest to God truth. When you get hired into a company as a CISO, your number one job is to be the person to take the fall when the company gets hacked.
I think that's a little cynical. I think that's a little cynical.
That's the honest to God truth. Whenever you get on like boards of directors and you start listening to what they say, it protects the CTO, it protects the CEO, it protects the COO, the CFO. That is the insurance stopgap for the entire company. And I talk to a lot of CISOs that are like, I'm in here, I have no authority, I can't change anything, no one listens to me. You are literally there to be the sacrificial lamb to be taken outside the gates and slaughtered.
So the reality to what he's saying is tied to the fact that we have now seen regulation push down potential criminal and civil liability to organizations, which means the CEO and the CFO, as the executive financial officer on behalf of that organization, have legal responsibilities for the status of it. And so the CISO is, in that case, basically the person on point for it. The reality, as that kind of challenge is fundamentally, IT security is a customer of IT, right? Without them giving us the data, right, we get what most of us get, which is, hey, we might have or you typically find a problem, and then you're like, where does it apply? And if they can't give that to you, it's because you don't have the executive sponsorship where that is a natural flow and there's that stick to make it happen. So to me, operationally, a CISO's whole job in practicality is to be the shit umbrella for you to go get you the resources from IT so that you can actually do your job. If you're not able to do your job, it's because the organization doesn't take what you do seriously. And by the way, your vote is with your feet. There's nothing you do, no amount of individual heroics is going to change that relationship.
And I've told many CISOs that are in that situation, what do I do? What do I do? Basically tell them, wait 6-7 months, start looking for another job. Because once you're in the CISO club, the C-suite, you can get moved around very easily. And there's lots of companies out there that are good companies. Find one and stay there. So, all right. That's it. Bryson, thank you so much for coming in. If you guys want to, please do me a favor. We spent a lot of time talking about emulation, simulation. I wore this for a reason. I've been with Scythe from the very beginning of them. You want to step this way. And go check them out. Really, they make this stuff a lot easier to do, and we're happy. They've been here for the beginning with Wild West Hackin Fest, so go check them out. Absolutely, they don't just have really cool swag. So thanks again. Round of applause for Bryson.